Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the Behavioral Corner. It's me, Steve Martirano. I hang here and I wait for interesting people to show up. I'm very lucky in that regard because they do. They just show up and they share their expertise and their insights with us. It's no coincidence that the second in our programs about gambling and problems associated with gambling is coinciding with what is referred to popularly as March Madness. And boy, talk about a great name for a situation. March Madness, for those of you who are just coming from another planet, is the name used to characterize the great NCAA college basketball tournament. Great fun. Everyone loves it. And it is, I think, you guys will correct me down the road, a larger betting proposition than even the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was the occasion for our first program on gambling and what it is now as opposed to what it was. So we're talking about gambling here on the Behavioral Corner with our guests. I want to introduce them to you now. Harry Levant is right there. And if you're looking at what I'm looking at, Harry's up there in the left-hand corner. As I said, Harry's no stranger to the program, having been on telling us his story about a pathological problem with gambling that he is now successfully overcoming. He's in recovery. Harry is also I've got to get all this right, with an internationally certified gambling counselor. As I said, in recovery. He's a doctorate student at Northeastern University. He's examining, and that's why he's here, the impact of gambling on public health. Two of his colleagues from that great university in Boston, and by the way, I resisted the urge to wear my Red Sox cap here today. I was going to do it, but I have too many friends in Philadelphia. From Northeastern University School of Law, our other guests are Richard Daynard. Professor Daynard is a distinguished professor at the University of Law at Northeastern. He's been at the forefront of the legal challenge concerning big tobacco. And there's a reason we mentioned the big tobacco connection, and you'll find out later what that's about. Thank you, Dick, for joining us. And Harry Gottlieb is with us as well. Harry is the executive director of the Public Health Advocacy Institute, also of Northeastern University School of Law. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. If you weren't so
thank you. It's Dick Daynard, and it's Mark Gottlieb.
Oh, how did I get that backwards? All right. Anyway, yeah. That's my dyslexia rearing its ugly head. Just this one thing about Boston. When I worked there, I was familiar with, Beantown and all those other things, but I was not familiar with the reference of Boston as the hub. And I thought, well, that makes sense. It's the hub of New England. And several local people went, no. It refers to the hub of the universe.
Right. No, right.
Which is exactly how I remember Bostonians. That's exactly right. It is the hub of the universe. So we got good people from a good place. Harry, let's begin with you. Gambling has been around forever. They gambled for Jesus's cloak. And before that, it is an activity that people have been doing since people could. It throughout that time has caused some people problems. You're certainly proof of that. We know all about that. But you guys show up with a much graver picture of gambling that involves all of us, gambling or not, gamblers or not. The potential for this activity, which, as I said, is very old, to metastasize into something that threatens public health. What changed? What made gambling so potentially threatening to us as a society? Harry?
Steve, thank you for the introduction. It's a privilege to be back with you, and even a greater privilege to be joined by my friends and my colleagues, Mark Gottlieb and Dick Daynard. As we talked about last time, gambling's been around from the dawn of time. I think I used the example when the first cave person invented the first wheel. It's likely there was some schmuck 3 caves down laying 3-to-1 odds that wheel wouldn't work. Gambling's not going anywhere. Gambling itself, as you point out, is not the problem. However, we are living through what has become, not becoming, what is now, a direct threat to public health. I see it every day with the patients that I treat at Ethos Treatment here in Philadelphia who are struggling with gambling disorder themselves and their family. And when you ask the question, what happened? It's really what is happening right now and what needs to be done about it. We're no longer talking just about a gambling industry and casinos. We are talking about what we describe as being the gambling establishment. It is a unique and unprecedented combination of gambling companies, media titans, technology companies, professional sports leagues and teams, the players themselves, state government, and various advocacy organizations, all coming together to deliver for profit what is a known addictive product. Gambling is as addictive as heroin, tobacco, opioids, alcohol, and cocaine. But now we have a series of organizations that have come together for profit, including government itself, to deliver gambling as quickly as humanly possible, as quickly as technology allows. I describe it as being a dangerous model that I call the AAC model. They are delivering access to action and having people chase that action constantly. As with any addictive product, the more rapidly it is delivered and consumed, the greater the harm that will inexorably occur. That's the threat to public health in a nutshell.
Yeah, we're reminded again, at least I am, that the internet and I guess microprocessing in toto is the sort of Frankenstein monster of our age. Everything it seems to touch, it changes, and in some cases demolishes business plans that have existed forever. It's a beast untamed. So let me see, and I'll ask Dick and Mark to jump in here now. I just finished reading David Milch, the brilliant writer and creator of HBO's Deadwood. I just finished his memoir, and Milch is a fascinating guy has demons that go back to his childhood. He's had all kinds of problems with addiction, not least of which is gambling. He is, as he describes himself, a degenerate gambler and always has been. He has a description of casino gambling that I want to get your impression on. He said that casino gambling, the physical place, is designed to provide the ability to gamble beyond time. And I thought, okay, sounds like what Harry and the boys are talking about. Mark, is that what we're talking about, beyond time?
Well, certainly the way casinos have been designed, involve environmental psychology, and a great deal of research to find out what will not only engage players, but will hold them there for longer periods of time than they would otherwise want to spend. And part of that, is you eliminate clocks and things like that. But it's really the games themselves, particularly the electronic games, that have become the dominant form of play in casinos, that put people in a mental zone, if you will, that in which time does disappear, and all that matters is pressing the button. And they call it a drip feed approach to player engagement, and they just keep playing, pressing the button on whatever machine it is, slot machine, poker machine, and eventually, they extinguish the funds that the player came in with slowly, but the idea is to keep people on those devices as long as possible, and part of doing that is to make time disappear. So I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah, Dick. The immersive nature of the casino is easy to see, and Mark points it out. There are no windows; you can't see outside. There is no outside. There's just this environment. They make the most money, I understand, per square foot in a casino floor with slot machines. That's why there are more slot machines than there are crap tables, even though craps is more fun than slots. They just make more money. And there's that repetitive nature of it, and that more than the environment, which is immersive, as I said, it's the constant nature of it, the availability of it. Is that what we're seeing now, that you can gamble from your phone?
Yeah, well, obviously they've taken it the next step, but it's more than a step. It's, you know, like I'm reminded when Neil Armstrong got out of the space shuttle and said, "One small step, for a man, a huge step for humanity." This is like not just a little step somewhere. This is like a whole new world, going into space, because. Yeah, it's one thing to go to. I mean, you go back 40 years or so. You wanted to go to a casino, you got a choice of either going to Vegas or Atlantic City. That was it. Well, then the other states got envious and greedy, and they figured they were going to, make lots of money too. Meanwhile, even Atlantic City was turning from a resort to a apparently a pretty depressing place with, all kinds of businesses closing, not opening. But they thought it was a good idea. It sounded like a good idea in terms of making money. Okay, so now you didn't have to go hundreds or thousands of miles. You could go 50 or 100 miles, depending on where you were, to a casino. But you still had to get up and go. And most people can't do that, the moment they get home from work or from school. Okay, this is why this is a, sort of a quantum leap, a whole different, dimension now that we've entered, where you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go anywhere. You just sit there and you're on your phone, and you can, play to extinction, without having to, get out of your pajamas. And, it's clearly going to be much, 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 much worse. Many times worse, because and of course, what you have with the repetitiveness, it would be one thing if the only thing you could bet on was the result of the game. Okay, who's going to win, and what are they going to beat the predicted point spread or not? Okay, but of course that's exactly the opposite of what they're going to be doing, what they are doing in some places, which is you get it on there and you can bet on, is the next pitch going to be a ball or a strike? Is the is it going to be a run, or are they going to is it going to throw the ball, and so forth and so on. So you have micro bets. They can be small or large amounts of money, but they're on micro events, tiny events that keep happening. So you keep going at it. As Harry said, it's the repetition. And, Mark informally had used the term when we were talking about this a few months ago, which I think captures it, which is, it's not the dough, it's the dopamine. And in other words, what's happening is, they've done here, and they're, simply following the great example of the tobacco industry and the junk food industry, which is they're figuring out how to fiddle with your brain. I mean, that's what they've done. And they have a way to get past your normal defenses, your normal common sense. Hey, use some common sense. Don't go keeping doing this. They figured out, how do you get around that? And they figured it out. And, we're going to be seeing them in the same way that, you have kids who, just are stuck on video games all the time. At this point, it's video games, but it's with their money, or if they get their parents' credit card, their money too, and so forth and so on. And obviously, each of these, many of these cases will end in one or another kind of disaster. And that's where we are today.
Harry, it sounds like an unfair fight, because a lot of people are sitting around going, well, just don't gamble. I mean, nobody forces you to stay inside of a casino. Nobody forces you to bet on whether it's a first down or not a first down. But what I'm hearing is something far more insidious. I'm hearing of techniques that have to do with very sophisticated notions of psychology and human behavior now working to break down whatever kind of self-control you might have. Are you hearing, when in your counseling, Harry, from a generation of people who are already habituated to do everything on their phone anyway. Are you hearing greater numbers of young people who just love the idea of being able to gamble on their phone?
I'm sorry about the pause. I was muted for a moment. Hearing it, Steve, seeing it, living it with my patients every single day, patients in their 20s, 30s, 40s, up to their 70s and beyond. Dick mentioned, you had to go to casinos. And you just mentioned phone. It's not just in the psychology of this. It's in how the new model of the gambling establishment has been set up. It goes back to your initial question of what changed. Let's put some real life examples on this, because we are talking about an addictive product in gambling being delivered in the most dangerous and addictive ways possible. And let's look at both casino games and sporting events. Casino games, if you live in a state where there is online gambling, as I do in Pennsylvania, and many other states now, you will see the gambling companies, particularly DraftKings, doing it now, where they are advertising. You can play up to 7 hands of blackjack simultaneously at one time, instantly, 7 hands of blackjack at once. I submit to you that if you are playing 7 hands of blackjack at one time, you are demonstrating symptoms of a potential gambling problem. And the gambling company knows this. 7 hands of blackjack all at once is not delivered with the normal or novice or regular player in mind. It is delivered to the person who is seeking constant access to action. And that's what the business model is built on. Dick mentioned micro betting within every single event, in every sporting event. And it was started with the NFL's business model with gambling and has now morphed into every single sport. The industry and its establishment partners are delivering the ability to have action on every single thing within a game. You're even seeing rule changes designed to facilitate these things. It's why we see instant replay on virtually every event that takes place within a sporting event. So we have some certainty for the gambler and the constant delivery of this access to action. And then we see it in the way in which it's advertised. The same game parlays. Everything about it is designed to deliver the product in the most dangerous way possible. And government has become a partner in that model.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about the alliance of forces that have come together to make this all possible. It's I know it's a cliche, but talk about an unholy alliance. We'll get to that in a second. But this whole idea of constant action, access, micro betting is astonishing, because listening to you guys talk about it, it begins to not sound like gambling at all. In fact, it sounds like the antithesis of gambling. People gamble for all kinds of reasons. Certainly winning and getting a little bump out of it psychologically is right there. But there's also the illusion that you're like, I'm figuring this out. I'm making a educated guess on who's going to win the game, or I like this horse over that horse. There's at least some illusion that you're making an informed decision. This has nothing to do with that, does it, Mark? I heard this expression like degenerate gambler for years, and it didn't apply to most people I knew, even heavy bettors, until I saw somebody playing Keno in an airport in Rhode Island. I had never seen Keno before in my life. And when I thought it was flight information, the first time I looked at the screen, so what the hell are all those numbers? And the guy said to me, it's Keno. And he explained, I said, Keno, well, how's that work? And he told me, Keno is numbers that flash up on a screen, every 2 minutes or something. And you
which is agonizingly slow compared to what we have now with micro betting, in-game betting. It's much less like gambling and much more like the administration of a drug. And
exactly.
And I'm listening to Harry describe, what he sees in his patients, and it seems and the DraftKings 7 blackjack hands at one time, and it reminds me of the notion of tolerance in substance use disorder, where you need a higher dose to achieve the same effect. And I think that's what we're seeing now with this chasing of access to action. And you need to have 2 hands, 3 hands, 4 hands. Well, now you can do 7 hands, and maybe we'll get 70 hands at some point, because people will be willing to do that, because that's what they need to get the same dopamine effect that they were when they were just playing blackjack the first time. So it's very much more like titrating a dose of a drug, and I think it's not a mystery why the gambling disorder is now categorized in the DSM-5 like a substance use disorder, and it's an addiction and not just a behavioral problem.
Dick,
before you go on behalf of my patients and their families that I'm so privileged to work with, I do need to voice an objection to the ongoing use of the word degenerate. Don't mean anything by it, but again, on behalf of my patients and their families, gambling addiction is the only addiction that has a descriptive adjective, that. And for people who are listening to this, and I know how important Behavioral Corner is to the mental health community and all the people it touches and helps, but there may be somebody out there who hears that word and is a little bit discouraged from asking for help. There's nothing wrong with anyone who is struggling with a gambling disorder. They are a person who is struggling with a known addictive product, and there is help available. So I just wanted to step in on that particular word for that particular reason.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask Dick. Do people appreciate what the potential for this thing is going forward? I've heard from my younger friends in their 30s that they know more than a few people who are, their cohort, who can't afford mortgages, who can't afford to pay off their college loans because they're either day trading and losing their money, or now gambling all the time online. Do we have to get to a point, and I'm bringing this tobacco, your background in big tobacco, do we have to get to a point where the effects of this are so devastatingly apparent that then we get action, or is it possible to get ahead of this?
Well,
because you guys are ahead of it. You guys are ahead of the curve on this thing.
Yeah, the problem is this steamroller is going so fast and in so many different jurisdictions, and it's all going in one direction. And there's really nothing, in the other direction. So you have, a great example of this was in Massachusetts, when the legislation that enabled, the sports betting went through last year. The original draft of the legislation forbade betting during the game, forbade this kind of micro betting. And somebody, one of the, or several of the, people from the gambling industry, the gambling establishment, came in and testified that no, if you do that, what'll happen is all this will continue to be done, but it'll be done by gambling folks from overseas. Well, the fact is you can't do that because the micro bets require that there be a definitive call made by somebody in an official position. So Harry knows this much better than I do, but the NFL purchased something called the Genius, I think it's called, and their job is to make an official announcement. How far did the ball travel? Was this an X or a Y, and so forth. So this was a total lie. There was nobody around to call them on it. They could say anything and have been saying anything, and simply nobody, there has been no counterforce, none. And therefore they've been able to say anything they want and, tout, the so-called benefits of this, with nobody having any, serious, thoughts about, hey, wait a second, aren't we really opening up I was going to say a can of worms, but that's much too modest. You know, dragons or whatever. So the fact is, nobody's gotten ahead of it at this point.
And they're replacing what I mean, they're sort of saying, oh well, we can't we can't let people go and get their caffeine from some out of state source because it needs to be that would be illegal. So instead, we're going to serve them cocaine here. I mean, they're giving them something that's much more addictive and dangerous in a regulated setting, which is quite ironic. And to get to your also to respond to your question, Steve, I do think that it's going to take, unfortunately, a lot of evidence of increased suicide and the destruction of families and the impact that has to be more publicly visible before policymakers are willing to jump in and slow down the gravy train, because as Dick said, this is all going in one direction right now. There are not any speed bumps being put in place to kind of control the unfettered, unbelievably rapid growth of gambling, whether it's particularly now we have sports gambling, but everything is mobile and available 24/7 and constant. And something is going to have to slow it down, and it's going to take some policy to do that.
Well, let's want to talk about the example of, yeah. Go ahead.
Speed bumps and guardrails. The Dick mentioned the micro betting and the NFL's model of genius sports, and how regulators are fooled. Steve, you made the suggestion there's no one doing anything about this. I submit to you, you're looking at three people who are starting to do something about this. As you know, we have a webinar tomorrow, March 15th, that takes on this very topic. And I'm of the view that regulators at the state level have either been horrifically misled or are just choosing to look in an entirely different direction. I think of the magician sawing the body in half. While the magician is sawing the body in half, she's also waving a big red handkerchief in the air to distract everyone so no one can see how the trick really works. Thus far, the gambling establishment has been able to mislead or distract regulators. But the more that folks like Dick and Mark and myself and others begin to talk about this from a public health model and expose the absolute myth of this responsible gaming model, the quicker change, guardrails, and reform may happen.
I couldn't agree with you more. But in fairness, it's one thing to say the British are coming, and another thing to kill the British when they do arrive. So
the difference is
so good for sounding the alarm. Let's talk about some proscriptions here now that you might be able to arouse public interest enough to have done. And Dick and Mark have great experience in going after big tobacco. I mean, there was a time in our lifetimes, for you youngins that don't know this, when smoking was so utterly acceptable, you smoke any damn place you wanted to, and no one ever conceived of telling you couldn't smoke. People are still smoking, but they're not smoking where they used to or as often as they did, and we've seen corresponding benefits in a public health realm. I didn't think anything was bigger than big tobacco. But this looks bigger. There are some really tremendous forces that are up against this thing. Let me ask you guys, what is analogous to how you and others fought big tobacco that might be instructive in this fight? Dick, go ahead.
Well, as you say, you have to go back to, if you go back to an era when, again, you had something over 50% of doctors smoking. I think in the 1950s, it was, considered relatively harmless. Your parents would tell you it would stunt your growth or something like that. That's what I was told when I was growing up. Fortunately, it never had any particular attraction for me, so I didn't do it, but I wasn't worried about stunting my growth. I mean, that was it. they weren't talking about lung cancer. They weren't talking about emphysema. They weren't talking about heart disease. They were talking about stunting your growth. Maybe, or that it's a rumor that it's bad. So you really need first to get the information out there. People have to begin to realize just how bad this is. They really need to change. I think it's really important to change the terms of discussion here from the idea that we're talking about the dough to we're talking about the dopamine. Because people think, if you're just talking about bets and things like that, I can figure that out. Other people can figure that out. It's just a bunch of people behaving stupidly or self-destructively. But when you realize that this is really, they're fiddling with your brain. They're fiddling with the way your body actually works. That's how they're doing this. That's the first step. Then the second step is to begin to pull back on, the place I would start would be on this, what's called whistle to whistle gambling. And it was from the beginning. You can't bet on anything that happens in the game between the first play and the last play. You can just bet on the result. If that's what Massachusetts was going to do until they were, deceived into not doing it. I think that would be the next step. And then I think, you just look and move, step by step, away from the kinds of things that are causing the, most massive harms. The advertising,
Well, that's the one where excuse me for interrupting. That would the first thing that comes to my mind is okay. They this is in motion, and people want to do this crazy sort of behavior, even if it's to their detriment. But why? And everybody wants to legalize it because there's a lot of money here. Why in the world is it okay to advertise this kind of behavior? For instance, how did they wind up getting tobacco advertising off of radio and television? I have had people in broadcasting tell me for years that was probably unconstitutional if you wanted to fight it on a First Amendment basis. After all, they had a legal product.
Okay,
how do they get that? How do they get rid of that?
There is an answer to this. The people, if Congress had banned the advertising, as it did initially with radio and television advertising, with the agreement of the tobacco industry, because there had been a doctrine that allowed counter advertising. Now that's a good one. We could go back to what's called the Bansaff doctrine, which says that for every 3 minutes of for every 3 minutes of tobacco advertising, you had 1 minute of counter advertising. The tobacco industry ended up lobbying for legislation to eliminate the right to advertise on radio and television. And when that passed, then the counter advertising, which the stations had to provide for free. They were getting paid for the tobacco advertising, not the counter advertising. So that eliminated the counter advertising, and sales went right back up. So that was the. So I think we can, if we bring back the Bansaff doctrine,
or as it was known, the fairness doctrine,
right?
And just to play devil's advocate, I think that First Amendment jurisprudence has changed a bit since the 1960s, and the fairness doctrine might not survive scrutiny by the current occupants of the Supreme Court.
Well, we actually don't know that. This would be this would actually be a totally different thing. I'm not at all sure that it wouldn't. Let me tell you what happened with the tobacco industry. What happened is they got sued by basically all of the states, sued them seeking their contribution to Medicaid and other payments that they were making because employees and citizens were getting sick from lung cancer and other tobacco-related diseases. The tobacco industry settled in something called the Master Settlement Agreement. Part of their settlement was an agreement, a binding agreement, to get their advertising off of radio and television and to tone it down in other ways. No, it was off radio and television already. So to get rid of most of the remaining advertising. And
it's included billboards, the Winston Cup, things like that.
the top of taxi cabs in Massachusetts,
Right.
in Boston.
Let me ask you, what was the absence of hard liquor on television and radio? A gentleman's agreement, or was that by statute? Because that's
I think it was a gentleman's agreement.
yeah, because that's snuck right back in. Now you see spirits advertised. I just think advertising is just an unconscionable thing. If you're going to unleash these forces on people who are unsuspecting and have no idea what's happening in their heads, having this stuff pumped at them constantly, well, that's one kettle of fish, which is horrible enough. But to every time I see the little furry mascot of the Pennsylvania lottery telling people, oh, just keep scratching. I just want to leap at the television set. That they shouldn't use a dime to encourage anybody to gamble. People don't need any encouragement. Yeah,
and of course,
I'm sorry, Dick, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and of course, advertising, again, is not, like gambling itself and like tobacco, cigarettes and so forth, does not, affect you. It does not work by rationally persuading you. Oh, I guess it's really a good idea, now that you think about it, considering the pluses and the minuses, to go and go there and bet or place this kind of bet. That's not the way advertising has ever worked. Certainly not in the last 100 years. So the advertising itself is designed to, seep into your, not past your conscious defenses, past your conscious thinking. And of course, it's doing that with the gambling as well. These are not persuasive arguments for doing it. These are, hey, wait a second, everybody's doing it. It's cool. Looks like fun.
And then you slap got a problem, call problem gambling. It's unconscionable and it should be stopped. Harry, what were you going to say?
Steve, and as you well know, as everyone on this call knows, I am no longer a lawyer, and I certainly was never a law professor. So I defer the legal analysis to Dick and to Mark. However, you asked the question, what can be done about advertising? And there are a few things that can be done that the public and regulators need to understand. First of all, when Justice Alito wrote the opinion in the Murphy case back in 2018, which paved the way for states to legalize sports betting, Justice Alito himself wrote in the opinion that states and Congress are free to regulate the gambling industry. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two, since 2013, the American Psychiatric Association, followed by the American Medical Association, followed by the World Health Organization, have all recognized that gambling is an addictive product on the same level as heroin. Once that is recognized by the federal government, I submit it creates much greater room for Congress to regulate. There are ways to regulate gambling advertising. What we see right now is it is unlimited, it is in your face, and most of all, it is impacting children because it is taking place within every sporting event during prime time. Games are just consumed with talk and advertising of gambling. As I like to say, if you think back to when ABC decided they were going to show partial nudity in the TV show NYPD Blue, which David Milch, who has a huge gambling problem he is working to overcome, created. Milch couldn't show us even part of Dennis Franz's backside until 10:45 at night because the federal government deemed it was dangerous before 10:45. Yet gambling every moment of every day when we know children are watching. Congress can most certainly address that. And that's part of what my work at Northeastern and the work I'm privileged to do with Dick and Mark is all about.
Dick Daynard and Mark Gottlieb from Northeastern University and Harry Levant. Thank you, guys. I am pleased and honored to have you on the show. I think you're doing absolutely important work. We like to talk about this podcast as a podcast about everything because everything affects our behavioral health. And nothing, in my recent experience, is as pervasive and insidious as this move to legalize gambling and the unholy alliance of the people that are lined up to make sure it's a big, big deal. I would urge everybody who has a modem and a phone to stop gambling for a couple of minutes and check these fellows out. They're going to have an absolutely unprecedented webinar, The Dangerous Myth of Responsible Gambling, March 15th. It's tomorrow.
It's free, by the way, Steve.
Free.
You can't lose anything.
Free is the great marketing expression of our age.
There'll be no wagering. There'll be no wagering during the webinar.
Consider it a course that you can audit from these two guys. Would otherwise cost you a lot of money to go to their classes. Anyway, so from 1 o'clock until 3 Eastern time, that's we give you the I guess it's mean Greenwich time, because you have an international cast of experts on the webinar. Urge everybody to do that. Dick, Mark, and Harry, thanks so much. I hate to use a bad betting pun, but I bet this isn't the last time we talk about this.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Pleasure.
All right, thanks, guys. And thank you all for your time. And don't forget to, hit the buttons and like us and check out the webinar. Check us next time on the Behavioral Corner. Take care. Bye-bye.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.